Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It started subtly, small excuses, casual rejections. "I'm just exhausted from work," he'd say when I asked if we could go out for dinner. I understood at first. His job was demanding, and I didn't want to pressure him. But then, it became a pattern. Every time I suggested a date night, a walk, even just grabbing ice cream, he turned me down. Yet, somehow, he wasn't too tired to stay up late on his phone, laughing at texts I wasn't a part of. The man who once planned weekend getaways and surprised me with little outings now barely left the house with me. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut, but it gnawed at me. One evening, as I was dressing up to meet friends, I noticed him getting ready too. Hope flickered inside me. Was he finally taking me somewhere? But when I asked, he quickly said, "Oh, just running errands. Be back soon." I smiled, but something felt off. Errands, work, last-minute plans with the guys. The excuses kept piling up, yet I never saw receipts, never heard stories about these supposed nights out. I wasn't looking to be suspicious, but when your husband suddenly becomes a ghost in your marriage, questions start to haunt you. One night, as he left for another late work meeting, I decided to do something I had never done before. I checked his location on our shared family app. My heart pounded when I saw where he was. He wasn't at work. He wasn't running errands. He was at a restaurant across town. The fancy kind, the kind we used to go to together before his so-called exhaustion took over. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Maybe he was with a client? A friend? My mind raced with possibilities, but deep down, I already knew. I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my coat, my car keys, and drove straight there. My heart pounded as I walked into the restaurant, scanning the tables. And then I saw him, my husband, the man who had refused to go out with me for months, sitting across from someone else. He was smiling, laughing, the exhaustion, the stress, nowhere in sight. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to storm over, but instead, I stood frozen, watching the man I loved act like a stranger before my eyes. My hands clenched into fists as I stared at the woman sitting across from him. She was younger, effortlessly beautiful, laughing at something he had just said. He looked so relaxed, so happy. My stomach twisted into knots. Who was she? A coworker? A friend? Or was she the reason he'd been too tired to go out with me? I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had to know the truth. I didn't approach them. Instead, I sat at the bar, my eyes locked on their table. Every time he smiled at her, my heart cracked a little more. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear. He didn't pull away. He didn't look guilty. He looked comfortable, as if this wasn't their first time meeting like this. My fingers trembled around my glass. This wasn't just a casual dinner. This was something more. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. I wanted so badly to believe that. But as I watched him reach across the table, his hand grazing hers, my doubts crumbled. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't a misunderstanding. I wasn't imagining things. My husband, the man who had refused to take me out for months, was here, on what looked like a date, with someone else. Confronting him right then and there would have been dramatic, but I wasn't ready. I needed more proof, more than just one stolen glance or a lingering touch. So instead, I snapped a photo from my phone. My hands shook as I saved it. My heart raced as I stood up. I needed to leave before my emotions got the best of me. I needed a plan, because this wasn't over. Not even close. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. Did he love her? Was she the reason he had become so distant? How long had this been going on? I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted the truth. And if he wasn't willing to give it to me, I was going to find it myself. I had been blind for too long. That ended now. The moment he walked through the door, I knew I couldn't keep quiet any longer. He smiled at me, his usual tired smile. "Hey, babe. Long day." I just stared at him, the photo in my hand burning a hole in my palm. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with unspoken rage. His eyes flickered, his smile faltering. "I told you work stuff." But I wasn't buying it anymore. "I saw you," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "With her." He froze. For a moment, I thought he might confess, but instead, he quickly shook his head. "What are you talking about? You must have misunderstood." His words sounded rehearsed, like he had been practicing this for some time. He tried to move past me, but I stood my ground. "Don't lie to me. I saw the photo." His face paled as I pulled up the image. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, but I could see the panic in his eyes. For the next few minutes, he stumbled over his words, trying to justify himself. But I could see it, his guilt, his discomfort. I wasn't the fool he thought I was. I don't know how it happened, he finally admitted. It started as just a friendship, but then it became more. I never meant for this to happen. My heart sank. He was admitting it. He had been seeing someone else. And it wasn't just one night. It had been going on for months. The flood of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, disbelief, sadness, betrayal. "How long?" I asked, my voice cracking. He hesitated, then answered, "A few months. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you." His voice was soft, but it did nothing to ease the pain in my chest. How could he have done this to me? The man I trusted, the man I had built a life with, had been living a lie behind my back. And now, I had to face the harsh reality of it all. "Are you in love with her?" I asked. He paused, his gaze avoiding mine. "I don't know," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. My heart shattered. I had never thought I'd hear those words from him. "I need time," he continued. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't know what to do." Time. I couldn't even think straight. The man who had promised me forever was now unsure about us. The trust was gone. I didn't know if I could ever get it back. In the days that followed, silence became our constant companion. He slept in our bed, but it felt empty. He spoke to me, but his words seemed hollow. The more I tried to reach out, the more distant he became. The photo was still fresh in my mind, and I kept replaying the moment I saw him with her. Was this just a phase? Was he going to choose her over me? My heart ached with every passing hour. It was late one night when he came to me, his face serious. "I need to be honest," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm not sure how to fix this. I don't want to hurt you anymore, but I can't keep pretending." I felt my stomach drop. "Pretending?" I repeated. "Pretending that we're okay?" He nodded slowly. "I care about you. I do. But I've been so caught up in this mess. I don't know what's real anymore." My heart cracked in two. The man I had once trusted had lost himself in lies and confusion. Anger burned through me. "How could you do this?" I demanded. "How could you betray me like this, after everything we've been through?" The tears came without warning, hot and bitter. He reached out, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me." The fight didn't escalate physically, but the words we exchanged cut deeper than anything else. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he whispered. "I wish I could take it back." That night, I stayed up late, thinking. The tears had stopped, but the pain lingered. I had been so sure of our love, so certain that nothing could come between us. But here I was, standing on the edge of losing everything. I couldn't deny it any longer. He had changed. He wasn't the man I married. And even if I could forgive him, would I ever be able to trust him again? Would I still be the same woman after all this? The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of the woman who had been betrayed. I realized then that I couldn't let this define me. I had two choices: stay in this marriage and fight for something that was already broken, or walk away and find myself again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't keep living in a lie. I took a deep breath, knowing that whatever I chose, it would be the beginning of something new. That evening, I sat down with him. It was time for the real talk, the one that would determine whether we had a future or not. He was still avoiding eye contact, his hands shaking as he fiddled with his glass of water. "I don't want to lose you," he said again, but there was a hesitation in his voice that I couldn't ignore. "But I don't know how to make this right." I couldn't help myself. I had to ask, "Do you still love me?" His eyes filled with regret, but his answer came slowly. "I don't know." That was the moment it hit me. His uncertainty lingered in the air like a thick fog. I knew I couldn't just wait around for him to figure it out. If he wasn't sure about me, then maybe it was time for me to start figuring out what I wanted. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything. The years we had spent together, the laughter, the love, the little moments. Was that enough to hold on to? Could I accept a marriage without trust? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I had to find them on my own. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a surprise visit. It was from her, the woman I had seen my husband with. She stood on my doorstep, nervous but determined. "I know you're angry," she said, her voice trembling. "But I didn't know he was married. I didn't realize." Her words trailed off, and I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but I stayed silent, listening to what she had to say. Maybe I needed to hear it from her perspective, even if it stung. She told me how he had pursued her, how he had told her that his marriage was falling apart, that he was too tired to work on it. He said you didn't care anymore, she admitted, that you wouldn't even notice if he was gone. I felt a wave of disbelief crash over me. Was this really how he saw me? Was that how he justified betraying me? I could feel my anger rising, but I held it in. You don't deserve this, she added quietly, before leaving as quickly as she had come. I was numb. The visit from her only added more confusion to an already shattered situation. My mind was a mess, and every answer I got only led to more questions. Was it worth fighting for? Could I rebuild trust after everything? I didn't know the answer, but I did know one thing. If I stayed, I had to make it on my own terms. I couldn't allow myself to be second place in someone else's life. The next day, I sat down with him, determined to finally get the truth. I could feel the tension between us, thick and suffocating. I know everything, I said, my voice steady. But there was a storm of emotion inside me. She came to see me. She told me everything. His face went pale, and for the first time, I saw guilt in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. His apology felt empty, and I couldn't help but wonder, was this really who he had become? I don't know if I can forgive you. I told him, my heart heavy. You lied. You betrayed me. And now, I can't even look at you without feeling sick. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. This isn't something I can just get over, I continued. I thought I knew you, but now, I don't even recognize you anymore. He sat back, his eyes filled with regret. I love you, he said softly, but I couldn't bring myself to believe it. Love didn't do this. That night, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I told him I needed space, that we needed time apart. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know if I want it anymore. His face fell, but I stood firm. I need to find myself again. I need to heal. And right now, I can't do that while living in this lie. He nodded, tears in his eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort him. I was too broken. Living alone was harder than I thought. The silence of the empty house echoed in my ears. I missed the little things, the way he used to kiss me goodnight, the way we laughed together. But those memories felt like a lifetime ago. Slowly, though, I started to rebuild my life. I focused on my career, my friendships, and most importantly, myself. I took long walks, spent hours reading, and reconnected with the woman I had almost forgotten in the chaos of it all. I wasn't healed, but I was starting to find peace. Months passed, and I realized something. I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had survived the heartbreak, and though the scars remained, they didn't control me anymore. I had learned to live for myself, and not for the man who had shattered my trust. One day, I found myself smiling again, not because I had forgiven him, but because I had forgiven myself. I had let go, and in that release, I finally found freedom. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.